tech giants dominate American markets. Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, and Alphabet, Google's parent company, account for almost a quarter of the value of the S&P 500, nearly double their share 5 years ago. Big tech dominance fuels concerns over the level of power these companies wield. Numerous antitrust lawsuits have been brought against tech firms, and there are increasing calls for greater regulation over them.
I can't answer that question yes or no.
Amy Klobuchar, a Democratic senator from Minnesota, is a vocal campaigner for reform. She's chair of the Senate Antitrust Subcommittee.
When you have monopolies controlling search engines and monopolies controlling app stores, you're not going to get those innovations that would allow you to get at the true problems that the products are creating.
In an interview with the Economist Asks podcast, Senator Klobuchar discusses whether America's mega companies should be broken up.
Amy Klobuchar, welcome to The Economist Asks.
Well, thank you, Anne. It's great to be on.
Now, the word antitrust, it strikes me as a bit of a historical artifact. It harks back to a time when big oil, rail and steel trusts had their grip on the American economy. Is antitrust the right concept for what you want to tackle now in the 21st century?
I would actually prefer to call it competition policy like they do in Europe, but I'm kind of stuck with our words we have here right now. The reason it's relevant is that we've now reached our own Gilded Age, and the players are different and the companies are more sophisticated. They have names like Google and Facebook. They are companies that do things like increase the price of a simple drug like insulin, or take a baby's heart drug by the competitor, corner the market, and take the treatment cost from $80 a treatment to $1,600. I would argue even more than back then, we need antitrust enforcement cards on that monopoly board. We need a check and balance on these companies. For those of us who believe in capitalism and believe that we must rejuvenate it by having more competitors, it's a literal cause that has to be met, or we are going to become another China with just gatekeeper companies and no choices for consumers.
We've seen corporate concentration rise during the pandemic, but also general trend in that direction in many industries. Are you more concerned ultimately about technology than you are about other American industry? But is there something specifically concerning about technological consolidation?
I think the challenge with tech is that it is such an animal unto itself, and it has given us these incredible innovations and employs so many people, and all that's great. None of that really has to go away. When AT&T was broken up, they had given us a bunch of great things in America and across the world as well. But that did not stop our government from saying, wait a minute, this is a vertical monopoly. They own all the equipment under it, and it's a horizontal monopoly in terms of the phone service. And we want to have more options. We want to have more options with cell phones. They broke them up. Cell phone options went through the roof, and AT&T itself said they were a stronger company because they were forced to compete. That's what we're dealing with right now. So when it comes to tech, you can do this by regulation, yes. You can put in place privacy regulations. Europe is doing this. You can do it with privacy regulations and limits on misinformation and limits on immunity. And then you can put in special things like for app stores. We just had a big hearing on that. But you could also do it through generic antitrust enforcement, which I think is a good way to go. And then finally, you can unleash the power of capitalism. How will we ever know if Instagram or WhatsApp would have developed the bells and whistles to do a better job on privacy or misinformation? We don't, because in Mark Zuckerberg's word in an email that was discovered last year, he literally said, these brands are nascent, but they are meaningful. And then in his words, they could become disruptive to us. And then he bought them. If you have a free market that works, then companies can develop solutions to problems like misinformation and privacy. When you have monopolies controlling search engines and monopolies controlling app stores, you're not going to get those innovations that would allow you to get at the true problems that the products are creating.
So let's be devil's advocate on that.
Of course, you're the economist.
Advocate. and say historically governments have intervened when there was evidence that a huge company was causing consumer harm. But consumers do continue to buy things in huge amounts from Amazon, from Apple, because it's convenient. They use Google's services very willingly. Is the standard for antitrust intervention changes that it could actually hurt consumers? And with the best will in the world, are you entirely sure where that dividing line lies and how far you should push it?
I'm talking about allowing competitors to have a chance. Look what happened in Australia. Google had 90% market share there, and so did Facebook. When Australia tried to charge for content in order to bolster up news organizations, which I think we should do here as well, then they said, well, we're taking our marbles, we're going home, and good luck with that because we have 90% of the market share. That is what monopolies do. Then there was public pushback. Microsoft did stand up and said, hey, we'll do this, but they were less than 10% of the market share. They were less than 5% of the market share. And so that's not a realistic option right now. And I think we need realistic options. And to get there, you need to put conditions in place. So these monopolies, Google and Apple on the app stores, aren't allowed to say, hey, you can't even say if you can get a cheaper deal on the website. And we're going to, by the way, charge you 30% of what you bring in. But we're not going to charge some companies. Maybe we'll focus more on our competitors. This is wrong. This is why Europe embarked on a year-long investigation of the app stores. These companies can still offer their innovative products, but maybe they won't be the only ones.
The battle royal on this between the maker of Fortnite, Epic Games, and Apple, the world's most valuable tech firm, is due to reach closing arguments soon. But legal experts do expect Apple to win. And given that expectation, how would you propose reining in tech firms? It sounds not only like you need to change laws, but you will have a huge long tail of cases which will be fought and in this case may well go against the antitrust argument.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't concede what will happen in that case after the hearing that we just had, where there was bipartisan Republican Democrats horror at what we learned from Spotify, Tile, and Match.com. And so what I would propose, first of all, is that we need to have stronger enforcement agencies. And that means making sure they're not a shadow of their former selves, which they are right now, even from the Ronald Reagan days. Senator Grassley, who's a Republican from Iowa, and I actually have a bill that would put more funding into those agencies. I think that's really important. You can't take on the biggest companies the world has ever known with duct tape and Band-Aids. The second thing is that you have to have the investigations occur so that the answer may be simply putting in conditions so that you're allowed to talk about where you can get a cheaper deal, so that you don't have to pay 30%. And no, not all that money is necessary for security. One of the things that we hope to learn in the Epic Games case is how much money Apple is really making off of their app stores, because they claim they need all that money for security. Epic Games, I think, has projected in one public document that they think it's like 75% profit turn. Okay, that's pretty high. And so all of that should go into the thinking of either regulators that look at it, and if they won't, then yeah, you could pass a bill that would put in some constraints on what's happening with the app stores to allow for more fairness for those that are purchasing apps on the app stores.
And once the verdict is reached, whichever way it goes, the question is, if you look at the European Commission's remedies, and I know you work closely with the European Union on this question, is that not much seems to change. And that actually is, in some senses, surprising or disappointing to many in Europe. If you look at an example of Alphabet, the Google parent company, which was fined multiple times, remedies were demanded, indeed imposed by the Commission, but in fact the market share for Google has hardly budged. So it would appear to have been ineffectual.
It's the beginning. And when you look at the breakup of AT&T, that took several American presidencies to get through it. And there hasn't been enough action in America. The only major suits that happened were at the very end of the Trump administration. And by the way, I'm glad they brought those suits, and I'm glad that it's bipartisan from one administration to another. The major lawsuits against Facebook and Google. That's just the beginning. So I think that as Americans, we should take some responsibility here, that it's time for us to join with Europe and act. And I think that's what you see finally happening out of these departments. But it's my job as a member of the Senate and a leader in this area to say, okay, we got to make sure we have the funding so that they can do these lawsuits. And we need to update our laws, including our privacy laws in the US. So I believe some of this is on us.
I'd love to know if you think Donald Trump should be banned from Twitter and Facebook indefinitely. The Oversight Board of Facebook has upheld the platform's decision to ban Donald Trump after those posts he released relating to the attack on the Capitol in January. Should they be deciding who gets deplatformed?
I think that it was the right decision. And when you have this enormous power, they are consulting with others. And I think that Donald Trump is the disinformer in chief. When you look back, he is still, maybe if he had changed his tune and said he was wrong, but this is a guy that basically is still discrediting our democracy. He is lying to people. He's telling them that he actually won the election. He is casting doubt. And as we know from the insurrection, people were believing that. And his primary and really only conveyor for those views was social media platforms. These guys are making huge money, the social platforms. I think that they should be able to hire the people to do the checking, to get this stuff off of there, because it is greatly influencing people. And that's just not right. People are going to die because other people or themselves are believing stuff like the vaccines, as I heard from a neighbor, the vaccines put a microchip in your arm. A guy that worked at a cafe right down the block from me, he said his mother-in-law wasn't getting the vaccine because of that. And she read it where? She read it on Facebook.
You can listen to the full interview in our podcast, The Economist Asks. Every week, we talk to a high-profile figure. Click the link opposite to find this episode, and thanks for watching.